The report has been released, revealing an incredibly slow military response hampered by confusion and miscommunication, it reports. Also, including some new details on why Ambassador Chris Stevens was at the compound at the time of the attack in the first place. Joining me now for the first interview since the report was released, the chair of the Benghazi Committee, Republican Congressman Trey Gowdy. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Well, there are a lot of charges flying around that this is all political and has been since the beginning. And at the news conference today, Congressman Pompeo really took out after Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton is not a featured target, I should say, in what I have read from the report.
And if you read the rest of it, she won't be either. It's about 4 Americans who bravely sacrificed for our country, others who were injured, and the nameless, faceless guys there that night that uncontrovertibly saved other American lives. She was the Secretary of State at all relevant times. It's naive to think a report on Benghazi can be written without mentioning her name, but we mentioned her name less times than the Democrats do in about half the pages.
What do you think is the major failure that you believe you've uncovered after 7 other congressional investigations, an independent State Department review, so many reviews of this tragedy?
Well, I think that there were failures in all 3 tranches, the before, the during, and after. And it's really inexcusable that that facility met no standards at all. So there's no way to judge whether or not the facility in Benghazi was secure because it met no standards. And that was an intentional decision by the State Department. My focus usually goes to the attack itself. We've been told forever now that no military asset could have reached Benghazi in time. And what we now know is that's true because nothing was ever headed toward Benghazi. And I think if the military leaders were with you, and I try to be fair to everyone, I try to be fair. I think the military leaders would tell you that they thought an evacuation was imminent. So you then ask the military leaders, what led you to believe that? Because the folks on the ground didn't believe that, and there was no method by which you were going to evacuate. So just those 2 screens, what was really happening in Benghazi versus what was being discussed in Washington, the contrast is pretty vivid.
And they had real-time reporting from the ground as to what was happening. There were the initial attacks, and they're correct. Nothing could have gotten there in time to respond to the initial attacks. But your point is that the Secretary of Defense, Leon Panetta, ordered a deployment of 2 teams, one to Benghazi, one to Tripoli. The one to Benghazi never was carried out, that deployment. The one to Tripoli didn't get there until 2 o'clock the next afternoon.
Well, it's not just that. I mean, it's both the specificity of what he ordered deployed, but it's also Secretary Panetta, this was 7 o'clock Washington time when he issued his order. Then we move into this 2-hour White House meeting where they say it is a discussion of what assets to deploy. Well, if you believe the Secretary of Defense, that conversation has already taken place. And I handle his question myself because I wanted to make sure I understood what he said. Active tents, deploy, you don't need to come back and talk to me, and there are only 2 people in our military chain of command, the Commander-in-Chief, the Secretary of Defense, and we have both spoken. And yet, nothing happened.
And that White House meeting, chaired by the Chief of Staff, Dennis McDonough, there was participation from all agencies, but Secretary Panetta was not there, and the Vice Chair of the Joint Chiefs did not participate in it. So there was no one operational. There was the Chief of Staff for Secretary Panetta.
Jeremy Bash represented the Department of Defense, and you may remember the spinning up email that he authored right before entering into that CIVITS, that 2-hour meeting. He said, we have forces or assets that are spinning up. And then the next paragraph says, assuming principals agree to deploy. And my question for Mr. Bash was, what principals were left to be consulted? You heard from the Commander-in-Chief. You heard from the Secretary of Defense. What are you deputies talking about? If the 2 people in our chain of command have already said go and go now, what's left to discuss? And that doesn't even get into the merits of what actually was discussed in this CIVITS. Of the 10 action items, half of them dealt with a video that up until that point had not prompted any response from the administration.
And the video was, of course, the whole issue of whether or not a propaganda video had incited the initial attacks, which we know didn't take place, but that's after the fact. Question about what could have even happened. I mean, their point is that at that point, and it's been fixed since, our forces were in Germany. They weren't anywhere close to Northern Africa. They couldn't possibly have gotten there in time. Certainly not in time to save the ambassador, and maybe not in time to save the last 2 Americans who were killed.
Well, the forces were in different places. The SIF was in Croatia on a training mission. Now, that training mission had been planned far in advance. Why you picked the anniversary of 9/11 to go on a training mission, I'm going to let the military experts decide. We had air assets that were fully disassembled. They were in equipment check mode, which means they were as bare as an air asset can be. Again, it is really curious that you picked that time to do it. And I guess, Andrew, my other point would be this. Cairo had happened. So it wasn't a theory that this video...
The embassy had come under attack in Cairo.
Okay, so maybe we were caught off guard in Cairo, although we weren't. We had advance notice. Go ahead and give that to the Department of Defense. Cairo happened. How did you change your posture or your readiness after Cairo? And the answer was they did not. So it is hard for me to explain to the families of those who were killed how the video became such a central talking point while the attack was going on, but nobody did anything about the video before the attack happened. That is difficult to explain to moms and wives.
And one of the more surprising facts that has been uncovered is how the surviving 35 Americans got evacuated. Yes, there was a C-17 sent in to pick them up at the airport, but they had to get to the airport from that CIA annex, which was under attack. And tell us from your reporting, your investigation, how they were rescued.
There were 2 air assets that ultimately evacuated our folks. One was a Libyan plane. And the other was a private aircraft that our folks in Tripoli just showed the ingenuity of finding. Neither one of those were U.S. planes. We were led to believe that it was friendly Libyan militias that helped defend the annex during the night and came to our rescue after Ty and Glenn were killed. That is not what the witnesses told us. One in particular, and I hasten to add, CIA did not want us talking to this witness. They made it very difficult for us to talk to this witness, but we found him. And what this witness told us is he worked the phone trying to find someone to come save them. And he wound up calling a group that none of the other committees identified, none of the other committees knew about it, and it was comprised of former military officials under Gaddafi. And they came, and not only did they evacuate our guys, Andrew, they saved other lives. We had people... Not just the 4 killed, there were people severely wounded. So time was of the essence. I just found it, ironic is not the right word, but I don't know what the right word would be, that we invest all of this time and money in Libya, $20 million in August, and we wind up having to call loyalists to the guy we'd opposed to come save our folks at the very end.
And why was Chris Stevens there? We know that he had been in Benghazi during the war. He really wanted this to work, but the security situation had deteriorated. It's your reporting that we knew something about a possibility of a Clinton visit, but you think that that was more of a, it was more part of that decision-making for his trip. He was filling in for someone who was not there at the embassy, rather at the Benghazi mission. But what about a possible Clinton visit?
Well, Greg Hicks alluded to that in OGR testimony a couple of years ago, but we didn't have any corroboration for it. We now have corroboration.
Being a State Department official.
But in fairness to everyone involved, Chris Stevens loved the people in Benghazi, and he had not been back to Benghazi since being named the ambassador. He wanted to go in August, but security and religious holiday reasons kept him from doing it. There was a vacancy in the principal officer's position, and to his everlasting credit and heroism, Chris Stevens assigned himself to fill that vacancy. And he went. And when he got there, he realized just how bad Benghazi was. So he canceled his off-property movements. In fact, he kept postponing his meetings because our intelligence guys were telling him how bad it had gotten, and he wanted to hear it. So he was in Benghazi for a number of reasons. Number one, he loved the Benghazi people. Number two, there was a vacancy in the principal officer's position. But number three, we were getting towards the end of the fiscal year. And if the secretary were coming back, and the email suggests that she was, they were looking for a deliverable. What can she deliver upon her subsequent visit? And that
I know Bernie Sanders said that, quote, the American people are sick and tired of hearing about your damn emails. But there are a lot of people who are not.
Well,
including FBI officials looking into whether national security was compromised because of this server. And this is something else that is very confusing to me. With all your experience, why wouldn't you anticipate that over the course of 4 years, handling very sensitive diplomatic negotiations, overseeing military interventions and surveillance, why wouldn't you anticipate that something classified, whether about North Korea or Iran or drones or an informant for the CIA, that it wouldn't be emailed to you? And why wouldn't you consider that having it on your personal account with some server in Colorado might be a potential risk?
well, first of all, nothing, and I will underscore, nothing that I was sent or that I sent was marked classified.
Secretary Clinton said she never sent or received any classified information over her private email. Was that true?
Our investigation found that there was classified information sent.
So it was not true.
Right. That's what I said.
Including
Secretary Clinton said there was nothing marked classified on her emails either sent or received. Was that true?
That's not true.
including
Secretary Clinton said I did not email any classified material to anyone on my email. There is no classified material. Was that true?
There was classified material emailed.
including
Secretary Clinton said she used just one device. Was that true?
She used multiple devices during the 4 years of her term as Secretary of State.
including
Secretary Clinton said all work-related emails were returned to the State Department. Was that true?
No, we found work-related emails, thousands, that were not returned.
including
Secretary Clinton said her lawyers read every one of the emails and were overly inclusive. Did her lawyers read the email content individually?
No.
including
False exculpatory statements, they are used for what?
Well, either for a substantive prosecution or for evidence of intent in a criminal prosecution.
Exactly. Intent and consciousness of guilt, right? Is that right?
Right.
Consciousness of guilt and intent.
including
And you would be arguing, in addition to concealment, the destruction that you and I just talked about, or certainly the failure to preserve.
including
You would also probably, under common scheme or plan, argue the burn bags of daily calendar entries or the missing daily calendar entries as a common scheme or plan to conceal.
including
2 days ago, Director, you said a reasonable person in her position should have known a private email was no place to send and receive classified information. You're right. An average person does know not to do that. This is no average person. This is a former First Lady, a former United States Senator, and a former Secretary of State that the President now contends is the most competent, qualified person to be president since Jefferson.
including
She affirmatively rejected efforts to give her a state.gov account. She kept these private emails for almost 2 years and only turned them over to Congress because we found out she had a private email account.
including
So you have a rogue email system set up before she took the oath of office, thousands of what we now know to be classified emails, some of which were classified at the time. One of her more frequent email comrades was in fact hacked, and you don't know whether or not she was. And this scheme took place over a long period of time and resulted in the destruction of public records, and yet you say there is insufficient evidence of intent.
including
You say she was extremely careless, but not intentionally so.
including
You and I both know intent is really difficult to prove. Very rarely do defendants announce, on this date, I intend to break this criminal code section. Just to put everyone on notice, I am going to break the law on this date. It never happens that way. You have to do it with circumstantial evidence. Or if you're Congress and you realize how difficult it is to prove specific intent, you will formulate a statute that allows for gross negligence.
Including
My time is out, but this is really important. You mentioned there's no precedent for criminal prosecution. My fear is there still isn't. There's nothing to keep a future Secretary of State or President from this exact same email scheme or their staff.
including
And my real fear is this. It's what the chairman touched upon. This double-track justice system that is rightly or wrongly perceived in this country. That if you are a private in the Army and you email yourself classified information, you will be kicked out. But if you are Hillary Clinton and you seek a promotion to commander-in-chief, you will not be. We would have done so. What we did instead was say gross negligence. Now, there's a reason for that. Intentionally hurting your country goes by another word. Treason. So we wanted to criminalize conduct that did not reach the level of treason. It was intentional. It was not an oversight. But until we figure out how to win national elections and control the executive branch, his interpretation of the statute carries the day, along with the Department of Justice. So he announced that she would, by the way, how many of you read the letter he sent Friday? Some of you, or was it Friday or was it Sunday? Yesterday. The first letter, I think, was Friday. This one was on a Sunday. All right? My eyes immediately went to one word, conclusions, plural. He had a number of conclusions in July, if memory serves. Our friends in the media skip over most of them, and they go simply to the fact that she's not being charged with a crime. But he had other conclusions. He concluded that she was extremely careless in her handling of national security-related matters. He concluded that she did not return all of her work-related emails. He concluded that she both sent and received information that was classified, and that some of it was marked classified at the time. Those were among his conclusions. He also concluded that no reasonable person would have done things the way that she did them. So if the media is going to talk about the conclusions, they should talk about all of them, which just leaves us with the conclusion that my friends in CNN have had as their breaking headline for the past 24 hours, Clinton cleared. Now I want you to take note of the irony of the closing argument of the Democrat nominee for president. That because the FBI did not find evidence beyond a reasonable doubt on every element of a criminal statute, that is somehow an endorsement for President of the United States. Surely to God, that is not where we are as a country. If that is the barometer for propriety, hey, I didn't get indicted. If that is the barometer for propriety, we've got some issues. But that's what the headlines all say today, right? Cleared. The other headline you see is no wrongdoing. I don't know what the word wrongdoing means. In a criminal context, the word wrongdoing is a meaningless term. Wrongdoing is a subjective word. You can commit wrongdoing without committing a crime. Comey was pretty clear what she did was wrong and stupid and careless. He just said it didn't rise to the level of a criminal offense. If Mr. Trump wins, the very first thing I would like to see him do is restore the independence, the lonely independence that is required of a Department of Justice for you to have confidence in. And I say lonely independence. I say lonely independence because prosecutors and cops are oftentimes lonely. The woman you work for that has on a blindfold and holds a set of scales often does not have much to say. She doesn't say a whole lot. So you have to rely on your internal sense of integrity. Am I following the facts? And here's the surest way we will know that that is true. Lady Justice does not know, it will not know on Wednesday morning whether it is failed Democrat presidential nominee Clinton or President-elect Clinton. She won't know, will she? She can't see. Will the investigations go forward? That's the surest way you will know whether or not you have an independent Department of Justice. The election should matter not one whit to a justice system. And as my friend Jason Chaffetz told me last night, Trey, it's not investigation, it is investigations plural. There's an investigation into the Clinton Foundation. There's an investigation into her false testimony before Congress. Tomorrow should have no impact on any of that. If you have a justice system that is truly independent. If you have a system of laws and not a system of men and women. We'll know that come Wednesday.
It was yesterday and now today. South Carolina Republican Trey Gowdy on the House Intelligence Committee will be questioning him behind closed doors. And sir, welcome back to America's Newsroom. Repeatedly yesterday, the FBI director answered this way to questions on the Hill.
That's not a question I can answer in this forum, Mr. Chairman, because it would call for a classified response. I have briefed leadership of the intelligence committees on that particular issue, but I can't talk about it here. To react to that, I have to give a classified answer, and I can't give it sitting here. I can't answer that here. That's not something I think I can comment on.
So there you have it. What's your question today?
Well, I've got a bunch, and we're going to do it in a classified setting so we can ask all of them. Bill, he is a foundational witness that touches all tranches of Russia and masking and unmasking and the dissemination of classified information. He really is a foundational seminal witness. So I'm going to start at the beginning. What is the evidence that Russia attempted to interfere with our 2016 democratic process? We're going to walk through that. Is there any evidence to tie the Trump campaign to that? And if there is, you need to tell us what it is. And then we're going to get into the masking and unmasking and the dissemination of classified information. We won't get it all done today. Make no mistake. He is a foundational seminal witness, but today we'll get started.
2 hours ago, President Trump tweeted the following. Susan Rice, the former national security advisor to President Obama, is refusing to testify before a Senate subcommittee next week on allegations of unmasking Trump transition officials. Not good, he concludes. She has rejected the invitation to appear publicly on Monday. What do you make of her case, Susan Rice?
Well, there are a couple of things there. She rejected an invitation. There are other ways to invite people other than via letter. There are things called subpoenas. You shouldn't have to use them with a former national security advisor, but if you do, you do. Susan Rice is also a very important witness. It may be that she concluded that public setting would not enable her to answer the questions that the senators are going to have, which is why we're going behind closed doors today. That's where most of these interviews ought to take place, given the subject matter. But she's a really important witness. And I'll say this, Bill, members of Congress don't pick the witnesses. Lawyers don't pick witnesses. The facts pick the witnesses. And whether Ambassador Rice likes it or not, she's a really important fact witness.
Well, Democrats would argue James Comey screwed up. Should have kept his mouth shut, not gone public in late October. Are they right?
I don't know what doors Director Comey saw. I can tell you this, he's not the reason. I don't think he told Secretary Clinton to have her own server. I don't think he told her to give disingenuous answers to questions throughout the campaign. I don't think he told Anthony Weiner to communicate via text with underage girls. So I don't see how any of this is Jim Comey's fault. He's got a really tough job. Someone was going to criticize him no matter what he did. He did what he thought was right. But I reject the notion that Jim Comey is the reason that we have President Trump. Secretary Clinton at some point ought to do a little self-reflection and go back and reflect on her own decisions, which led Director Comey to have to make the call he did.
Take you back to last July, Phoenix, Arizona, on the tarmac. James Comey brought it up yesterday. He answered it this way.
The capper was, and I'm not picking on the Attorney General, Loretta Lynch, who I like very much, but her meeting with President Clinton on that airplane was the capper for me.
How does that change now in light of where we are today on your investigation?
Well, it doesn't impact our investigation. We have a new Attorney General. Loretta Lynch is gone. The decision to meet with the spouse of the target of an ongoing criminal investigation, you know in your first year of law school not to do that. So Loretta Lynch is going to have to explain her thought process there. Director Comey says that was the straw that broke the camel's back. I have no reason to contradict him.
Do you think that was the original sin in all of this?
I don't know. I don't know what the original sin was. It was a very complicated fact pattern, exacerbated by the fact that we were in the throes of a presidential election. Director Comey felt the need to update Congress on this previous testimony, and he thought this was the way to do it. But again, Bill, who is responsible for the entire fact pattern up to that decision? It's not Jim Comey's fault that Loretta Lynch met with Bill Clinton, and it's not his fault that she had this curious email arrangement with herself. I'm blaming the warden.
That means in every answer you're given, the original sin comes back to Hillary Clinton's server. Because had she not set it up, we would not be where we are today. That's what you're saying.
I'm reluctant to use theological terms like original sin, but that decision to have her own unique email arrangement with herself and then keep it quiet for 2 years was a really bad decision.
Sir, thank you for your time. Trey Gowdy on the Hill. It's not over today. That's what you say, right? How much longer?
That's right. Well, we're just starting today. We've got perhaps 100 witnesses we need to talk to, and we're going to get through 2 of them today. We're going to do it the right way, and however long it takes to be able to tell your viewing audience what happened last year, that's how long it'll take.
Thank you for being here. Trey Gowdy,
yes, sir.
As he goes behind closed doors. Thank you.